And when I first moved to London, every single time I visited the museum, I was fascinated by the height, stature, and sheer presence of Dippy, the dino star of the museum. And when you think about dinosaurs, you can't help but think about stories of extinction. Now, Darwin's theory of evolution has taught us that it's not the largest or the strongest of species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but those that are more responsive to change. And speaking about stories of extinction and survival, we are presently aware that our planet is at risk. And the type of capitalism we have built over the last century is no longer working for society today. Simply put, the ways in which we used to approach business are no longer sustainable. Issues facing our planet and society indeed are not new. The alarm bells have been ringing and keep ringing all around us, with new documentaries reporting on the threats of climate change, or the daily news that show concerning situations in factories in developing countries, or stories of unethical and illegal behavior. What is less evident to some, however, is that the stories of extinction and survival do not apply only to nature. Companies and business in general are also under threat. This decade has been coined by many as the decade for action for our planet. It is also the decade for action in business. Survival is at stake. I have been researching, teaching, working with companies in the field of strategy and sustainability for 15 years now. And believe me when I say that many companies still today are not taking this seriously. And even despite of the warnings and the acknowledgement by many that urgent action is needed, companies struggle to understand why transformation is needed and what type of change is needed. And I argue that unless companies today, big and small, choose change, they will face a survival problem. And pay attention, not in the coming decades, but in the coming years. My experience in this field suggests that there are three key issues that explain the lack of engagement with sustainability in business. The first issue I recognize is the lack of a common definition. Every single time I ask students, managers, entrepreneurs to define corporate sustainability for me, I get a different response. And it became very, very clear to me that if we wanted to address sustainability in industry, we needed to have a common definition and understanding. And in my most recent book that was published in early 2021, I decided to address this very issue. And I researched the literature, I engaged sustainability experts and practitioners from different countries and different industries. And I asked them to define corporate sustainability for me. And what emerged from this exercise is that modern corporate sustainability builds on four key concepts. The first concept is purpose. Purpose is a powerful force for change. And today, there is evidence from research that purpose-led companies have greater financial performance, and purpose-led brands have the ability to establish longer customer relationships that increase customer loyalty and sales. The second concept is creating shared value. which means to rethink business models so that economic value is created jointly with societal value. And this calls for moving away from approaches based on a corporate social responsibility that primarily focus on reputation, towards approaches where sustainability is fully and truly integrated into business strategy. The third concept is power sharing and ESG-based decision-making. In order to create value and enable change, companies need to give a real voice, not only to shareholders, but also to employees and other stakeholders who represent the interests of the planet and society at large. And environmental and social and governance criteria should be used at all levels of decision-making. And the third concept is the concept of enhancing competitiveness. If sustainability is correctly integrated into business strategy and operations, there is evidence that it can help companies to become more competitive and more profitable. So, building on these four concepts, my definition of corporate sustainability is the following. Corporate sustainability is an integral approach to business, aimed at enhancing competitive positioning and profitability through the sustained creation of shared value, co-creation practices with stakeholders, and the integration of ESG factors in decision-making. And I invite companies to reflect and consider this definition, because getting the definition right is a crucial point to get the strategy right and the journey of transformation right. The second issue I have identified is the inability of companies to recognize the new drivers of competition. Drivers of competition in industry change over time, at times very suddenly. And the companies need to recognize these drivers, and they need to adapt. Darwin's theory of evolution applies. Let me demonstrate you this with a couple of stories. And let me start actually with a question for you. How many of you in the audience have got a Nokia cell phone today? Please raise your hand. Okay, interesting. So it seems that in this theater today, Nokia's market share is probably less than 5%. And what is interesting is that less than 15 years ago, Forbes was dedicating the cover page to Nokia, celebrating the company achieving the milestone of 1 billion customers. That's more or less 1 out of 7 people in the world. And the title of the special issue was, Can Anyone Catch the Cell Phone King? And fast forward just a few short years, and Nokia is no longer the market leader, far from it. The industry was undergoing a major shift in innovation and technology, transitioning from mobile phones to smartphones. And for its part, Nokia failed to recognize and seize the change that was unfolding in the marketplace. Poor strategy and inability to adapt to change were at the root of Nokia's fall. So substantially, Nokia's story in the mobile phone market is a story of extinction. A different story with a different ending is the one of Nike. Also a market leader, in the 90s, Nike faced a major scandal as a consequence of labor and human rights issues that existed in the company's supply chain. And the reputational damage that was caused by this scandal impacted massively on the financial performance of the organization, up to the point that for the first time, Nike faced a survival problem. And instead of choosing to ignore the warning signs, Nike decided to engage in a journey of transformation. A journey of transformation that has led the company to rethink product and services, to rethink value creation processes, to improve the sustainability of supply chain activities, and overall to improve the future sustainability of its business. Nike's story could have been readily a story of extinction. But the scandal became a catalyst for the type of change Nike itself wasn't aware it needed. So these two stories underscore the fact that the drivers of competition change in industry. And I strongly, strongly believe that today sustainability is a key driver for competition in industry, and it is a key element for survival in industry today. The third issue I have identified is the lack of a sense of urgency. Darwin's theory of evolution has taught us that key for survival is the ability to gradually adapt and change. But when I think about businesses today, one thing they no longer have is the luxury of time. According to a study by McKinsey on SP 500 companies, the average lifespan of corporations in 1958 was 61 years. Today is less than 18 years. Companies can and will disappear faster than ever. Nike, when they faced the scandal in the 90s, they decided to engage in a journey of transformation that has taken the company decades to build and that still continues today. And this means that sustainable transformation is complex and takes time. And today there is also another problem. We do see a gap between intention and action. A recent PwC report that looked into how companies integrate the sustainable development goals into their plans found that while 72% of companies mention the SDGs in their reporting, only 25% of companies actually integrate the SDGs into their business strategies, and only 14% of companies disclose KPIs and targets associated to the SDGs. It is very urgent that companies move from big commitments to real action. And for this purpose, I believe that there is a tool that today is still vastly underutilized that can really help companies to accelerate the process of sustainable transformation. And I'm referring to the use of economic incentives associated to ESG performance in the context of executive pay. This is a tool that companies should adopt in the next years. So where to from here? In this decade of action, there are only two paths for business for the way forward. The first path will lead to extinction. This is the path that companies will face if they decide to not engage with sustainability. The other path will lead to surviving and thriving. And I strongly, strongly believe that the companies that will learn to approach sustainability correctly, companies that will learn to integrate sustainability into business strategy, companies that will act with a real sense of urgency, I strongly believe that these companies that will not only survive, they will thrive. So I guess the question to companies is, which path will you choose? And the question to managers, executives, entrepreneurs is, What do you want your legacy to be? And speaking of legacy, I would like to end this presentation with a very personal story about my own journey that has led me to be with you here today, and also helped me to answer these very questions. In 2007, I lost my academic mentor and also friend in a tragic car accident. He passed away at the age of 35, and at the time I was only 25. And it was a real shock for me. And in that moment, in the middle of many emotions, I asked myself, what if, Paolo, this happens to you? What if you have only 10 years left? What kind of person you want to be? What kind of legacy you wish to leave? And looking inside me and leveraging the education I received from my family, I decided I wanted to be a change maker. I decided I wanted to use my passion, my education, my skills to inspire the future leaders and drive change in business. And driven by this sense of urgency, I work very hard every day to make this happen. So my message to companies and business leaders today is the following. If you are already familiar with the topic of sustainability and you have already engaged in processes of sustainable transformation, keep going. If you are not familiar with the topic of sustainability, or you have not engaged yet with processes of sustainable transformation, my message to you is that it is not too late. And this brings to mind a famous Chinese proverb that says that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Thank you.